Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Devastating fire.
I'm banging on the door telling them, get the hell out of here now.
Dozens of people left homeless after a fire rips through a building in Vancouver's Mount Pleasant. Plus, drying up.
We had a very early spring with incredibly hot temperatures.
Metro Vancouver enters stage 2 of water restrictions, the worst condition in 8 years. On the move.
I'm excited to welcome people to come and to witness it.
Saved from demolition, the Kitsilano schoolhouse ready to be moved to its new home.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. The devastating effects of a massive apartment fire in East Vancouver last night is being felt today. More than 70 people are now homeless, with firefighters saying it's unlikely they will ever be able to return home. And as Jessica Chung reports, 5 people were taken to hospital, as well as a firefighter.
Tell me about the experience. What happened?
Pardon?
What happened?
Trisha Ruda was at home when the fire started.
I was banging on people's doors, screaming at them because I live in 107, right? And I ran up to the 3rd floor and I saw all the smoke, and I'm banging on the door telling them, get the hell out of here now.
Fire started sometime before 8:30. It's a 3-story, 40-unit building in the 400 block of East 10th Avenue. Vancouver Fire Chief Karen Fry says the flames broke through the roof.
It appears at this time that it's going to be pretty completely destroyed or uninhabitable after today.
Fry says several people had to be rescued by fire crews, some treated for smoke inhalation. A number of firefighters were also treated on site. Fry says the exact cause of the fire is still under investigation.
It appears from early indications that it may have started within a unit when it was heavily loaded with combustible material. So what we would traditionally call hoarding or personal belongings of an individual.
Fry says dozens of people who lived in the building are now displaced. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
Police have identified the victim of a fatal shooting in Richmond yesterday near Mindler Road and Blundell. The man who was killed yesterday was 36-year-old Ravinder Samra. RCMP say they believe the shooting was targeted and associated with gang activity. Police responded to reports of gunfire just before 6 p.m. Officers found Samra, who died on scene. A vehicle was also found several blocks away, engulfed in flames. Investigators believe it is connected to the shooting. Anyone with information is asked to contact police. And Metro Vancouver has announced stage 2 water restrictions starting next Friday. Those restrictions prohibit all lawn watering as well. Residents cannot hose down sidewalks or driveways, and water features such as fountains should not be filled or topped up. But vegetable gardens can still be watered at any time. Trees, shrubs, and flowers can also be watered by hand or by using soaker hoses or drip irrigation. This is the first time Metro Vancouver has implemented stage 2 restrictions in 8 years. The vessel blamed for causing major delays at BC Ferries is back on track. The coastal celebration was out of commission for 9 days due to mechanical issues. Premier David Eby says he spoke to the Ferry Corps management today.
The ferries are central to who we are as a province, and it's not an optional service for people. They depend on that service. We need them to do everything they can. They're independent of government in many ways, but they are not independent from accountability to the people of British Columbia.
Eby went on to say that the recent issues have been unacceptable. The return of the coastal celebration means that 8 daily sailings that it provided are back on the schedule. Passengers in Tsawwassen today say still they were prepared to wait.
We're just like, okay, let's get here early and cross our fingers, and if it's meant to be, we'll get on. And we got on.
We've done this many, many, many times. Sometimes we have to wait a few sailings and sometimes not. But the reservation system works very well.
I was a little antsy about trying this. I haven't traveled ferry for years, but so far so good, so fingers crossed.
Despite the lack of chaos today, passengers remain concerned about what next week's long weekend travel, though, has to offer. Two new BC MLAs were sworn in today in Victoria following a pair of by-election wins in June. Our Mira Baines was at the ceremony.
After an official ceremony at the BC Legislature, Joan Phillip is the first Indigenous grandmother to become a BC MLA. Ravi Parmar, at 28, becomes the youngest current MLA in the legislature. Phillip, a climate activist, won in the Vancouver Mount Pleasant by-election. The seat was previously held by Melanie Mark, who stepped down earlier this year. Both MLAs outlined their goals after the ceremony.
Affordable housing, health care, and safety was an issue.
Parmar is a former Souk School Board chair elected for Langford-Wanda Fuca, the seat once held by former Premier John Horgan, who also attended the ceremony along with other politicians in the chamber.
Tackling the cost of living issue that's impacting so many young families, in particular in Langford and Souk, two fast-growing communities, making sure that we're investing in the infrastructure to keep those communities going.
The duo welcomed by the Premier.
Those communities have two champions here in the Legislative Assembly, and it was great to be part of the swearing-in ceremony as they settle in and get ready to get to work for their communities.
Both NDP wins were not a surprise in ridings previously held by popular politicians. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
NAV Canada is making it easier for passengers to stay up to date on the status of their flights. The agency has launched a new communication protocol to provide timely and accurate information regarding flights and possible delays. The new initiative will focus on 4 major airports, including YVR. Air passenger rights experts say it will keep airlines honest about flight delays.
The airline cannot engage in baseless finger pointing. If there is a weather issue, everybody can go to the Twitter feed of NAV Canada and say, hey, that's what's happening. It makes sense. On the other hand, if an airline claims that their flight is delayed because there's a weather issue and there's nothing on NAV Canada's website and the weather is nice and sunny, then probably the airline is making it up.
Whenever an issue is expected to cause delays of 60 minutes or more, the information will be shared via NAV Canada's X account, also formerly known as Twitter. Hundreds of residents displaced by a wildfire near Kamloops are now able to return home. The Rossmoor Lake wildfire was sparked by lightning a week ago, forcing almost 350 properties to vacate. Now, residents from most of those homes can return. Wildfire crews have made progress containing the fire. However, 18 properties are still on evacuation order, and the rest downgraded to an alert. And Darius Madavi joins us now with the first look at the weather. So Darius, any rain in the forecast at all, we think?
No, it doesn't look like it, not here at least. Across the province, it's a different story. We can see from the fire danger that we have kept going up from where we were at the beginning of this week. Looks like that was going to be our low point for the near future. Especially in the south, we've seen the fire danger come up because we haven't seen any more rain since that little spurt we got, and same in the northwest. Now, we can expect more or less the same through the weekend, although some rain for the central interior will be very welcome, I'm sure, and for the northern part of the island because of this low pressure system just off Vancouver Island. It's very high in the atmosphere, so we're not expecting it to be too dominate the weather systems too much, but it should cause plenty of showers for the north, the central part of the province, and also some instability down here in the southeast. The Kootenays could see some thunder showers over the weekend as a result. The north, though, staying completely dry this weekend as a result of this high-pressure system that should stay in place through most of the weekend. Now, if we take a look at our rainfall forecast, we can see that not too much accumulation in most of the province, except for right here, the north coast, central coast, and the central interior around Prince George should get a good bit of moisture, but nothing here in Vancouver. It looks like the next 24 hours is going to be dry as it has been, and we'll have more later this hour.
Okay, sounds good. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
A 111-year-old schoolhouse in Kitsilano has been saved from demolition. The building will be transported across the Burrard Inlet to the North Shore, a site you can watch for yourself next week. And as Michelle Gassoub reports, the company behind the move hopes it will inspire others to follow suit.
This quaint yellow schoolhouse has been perched at the corner of Cornwall and Maple since 1912. It was slated for demolition to make space for Henry Hudson Elementary, but instead the structure has a dramatic journey ahead.
We said this is a really good building. It shouldn't be demolished. In fact, it'd be tragic if it was demolished. And so we said, listen, why don't we look at relocating and repurposing it somewhere?
In the dead of night on August 1st, the building will be loaded onto a trailer, rolled a couple of blocks west to Kitsilano Beach, then, at the very highest tide, moved onto a barge. From there, it will travel around Stanley Park and under the Lionsgate Bridge to its new home in North Vancouver. Work like this moves at a glacial pace. The whole operation will take upwards of 16 hours to make sure no part of the street or beach is damaged.
But the challenge is to get them as quickly as you can to water because of the complexities of the trolley lines and the power lines and trees and different road constraints. So we're very fortunate with this building. It was only 2 blocks away from Kitts Beach.
The schoolhouse will find new life with the Squamish Nation. The nation says the building will help address urgent infrastructure needs and will serve as a dedicated space to teach young people the Squamish culture and language. The hope is the school's journey across the inlet will inspire others to repurpose rather than demolish.
Imagine what this building has seen over the last 110 years. You know, when it was first built, we were mostly moving around by horse and carriage. I'm so excited to think about how the world will change around this building in the next 110 years.
And if you can wake up early enough on August 2nd, you too can catch a glimpse of the house and a piece of Vancouver heritage in the middle of the street. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, the search for BC's best lake continues. After thousands of votes, we've narrowed it down to our 4 semi-finalists. And Justin McElroy, the man behind the madness, usually he's here to bring, clarity to confusion, but he's the man behind all of this. He's going to join us now for more. So, Justin, will you please take us through the final 4 lakes battling it out?
Yeah, so we had more than 600 submissions for lakes across the province. We had 48 that people voted on, and now it is just our final 4. So we have 2 sides, Southwest BC and the interior. Let's take a look at how we got to the final for the Southwest. You see a lot of names on that board right there, but you zoom in and you see that yesterday it was Sprout Lake defeating Cowichan. It was Garibaldi defeating Alouette. So it's Garibaldi versus Sprout in the Southwest final, one of the 2. A real stylistic matchup there, right? Garibaldi, really difficult to get to up in Whistler, but very beautiful. Sprout right in the middle of Vancouver Island, a long-time fishing and camping place for so many generations of people on the island. Then you look at the interior, and if we zoom over there, we can see that it was Kalamalka defeating Okanagan in what was a really tight matchup there yesterday, and they'll be going up against Shuswap, houseboating capital of Canada. So many things you can do, so many little villages and communities along that lake, nooks and crannies for different hikes and waterfalls. Both are truly beautiful. All 4 lakes are truly beautiful, Leanne, but ultimately only one can win. The voting for the semifinals is happening on Tuesday.
Okay, and Justin, is there a favorite expected to take it all?
I expect it to be one of the 2 that we're seeing right here, Kalamalka or Shuswap. There's been more votes coming out of the interior in this competition than from Vancouver Island or Southwest BC, maybe emblematic of just how important lakes are there. Now, it's possible we could see Sprout or Garibaldi win. If Garibaldi wins, I might have a little bit of a hike to get there. That might be a little bit difficult to do. But the winner of this matchup on Tuesday, Kalamalka versus Shuswap, probably going to be the favorite. Of course, it's up to viewers to go and vote and decide whether that's actually true or not.
See, it's not just going to be you, Justin. It's going to be you plus a camera person who will not be happy that they have to hike up to Garibaldi if they win.
I mean, some of our camera folk like to hike. Me, on the other hand, a little bit more lukewarm.
That's right. GP Mendoza, Maggie McPherson, they'd probably be all over it.
And they'd enjoy seeing me suffer.
Yes, I think we all do. Always fun. Thank you so much for that, Justin.
Thanks, Leanne.
Canada's women's soccer team has reached an interim deal with Canada Soccer for compensation. But as Ithil Musa tells us, they're not happy with the choices they had to make.
At the FIFA Women's World Cup, Canada's team has been focused on the field. But behind closed doors, they've been busy negotiating a new compensation deal.
Super frustrating to know that the players have been forced to get on a table and talk about an agreement, a deal when they're at camp, at the World Cup.
The interim agreement will only cover 2023. It will include prize money from the Women's World Cup and ensure equal pay to the men's team. But the women say there are issues left unresolved. We have been forced to choose between compensation and the funding required to hold necessary training camps. We are disappointed to find ourselves without a more complete agreement at this crucial stage in our calendar. This isn't over.
So this isn't a win. This isn't a win. It's embarrassing that a national sport organization has put our national teams in this kind of position in the first place.
In a statement to CBC News, Canada Soccer acknowledged there's more work to do, but said this is another important step forward for equalizing the standard of care and pay equity for our players. The long-simmering dispute reached a boiling point in February when the team initially refused to take the field at the She Believes Cup in Florida. Then in March, appearing before a parliamentary committee, team captain Christine Sinclair testified that when she raised her team's concerns to former Canada Soccer president Nick Bontis,
the president of Canada Soccer listened to what I had to say, and then later in the meeting referred back to it as, quote, what was it Christine was bitching about?
Canada's federal sports ministry says it will always support the right of female athletes to fair and equitable compensation, and Canada Soccer must be transparent at the negotiating table. Idil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, her popular Eras tour is on track to earn a record-setting $1 billion in sales, but Taylor Swift and her fans managed to break a different record last weekend in Seattle. A Western Washington University seismology professor found Swift's 2 shows at Lubin Field caused the seismic equivalent of a 2.3 magnitude earthquake. Jackie Kaplan-Auerbach told Seattle's King 5 News that the so-called Swift quake was consistent across both nights and about twice as big as the previous Lumen Field record holder, the Beast quake, which saw Seahawks fans erupt following a touchdown by Marshawn Lynch. The researcher notes that Swift's concert ran for several hours and had a considerably larger audience. Can't mess with those Swifties, hey? An archaeological dig at Cordova Bay in Saanich has unearthed signs of a First Nations village that's at least 1,000 years old. The dig is being led by a team from the University of Victoria, and we had a chance to stop by. Take a look.
So we've got an ash lens, a mussel lens, a broken shell lens here.
We are standing here at the ancient village site of Tsalich in Cordova Bay, right on the waterfront in a tiny little agate park. Our students and our partners from the Saanich communities have been here throughout the month of July, investigating all of the elements of ancient life that are shown in the layers and levels below the surface here at this ancient village site. If you can picture this as a thriving community with 200, 250 people living in the classic Coast Salish longhouses right here on the waterfront in Cordova Bay. The village is old, it's very old. We have one radiocarbon date from a salvage dig that was done nearby, just under a meter in depth, and that was around 1,000 years old. And we think that this site, it appears to go down as far as 243 centimeters, so quite deep stratigraphic deposits. So it's the sort of classic elements of domestic life. We're looking for house floors and the areas in front and behind the houses. We're finding fire hearths and tools and lots of evidence of the kinds of food people ate, elk and clams and every kind of fish imaginable. So the Sayout First Nation has been a wonderful partner and really the leader in asking the questions that we're trying to answer as part of our research. We have oral histories from elders that we're drawing on, these kind of colonial documents, and then looking at the archaeological information that comes up as we're excavating in our layers and levels.
I've been learning about our people for years. I've heard stories about, especially here, how there was canoes all along the beach and would have big feasts in the area, and I've never actually seen it until now. Like it's an uplifting feeling for me to actually be here. It feels like I came home, even though our people never years ago never been in one area. We've traveled everywhere, and I've heard stories about how we traveled all along the areas here and had big feasts and gatherings and ceremonies. And personally, it feels really good to be down here because I can feel that strength that our people had back then.
BIPOC storytellers, producers, agents, policymakers, and more are all meeting in Vancouver this weekend to find ways to increase diversity in entertainment. We'll hear from one of the summit's keynote speakers next. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Soccer players at Peak Performance Camp on PEI are feeling pretty inspired. They ditched the pitch to watch a live stream of Team Canada facing Ireland in Wednesday's FIFA Women's World Cup game. We caught up with the young women before they even knew Canada beat Ireland 2-1.
So tell me, have you been watching the World Cup games?
Yeah, a few, but not all of them because they're past my bedtime.
What are you feeling when you're there watching, like, is Canada gonna score this goal?
So excited and enthusiastic and sometimes very stressful, but that's okay.
It's like really exciting and cool to watch.
It keeps you on the edge of your seat waiting to watch more. It makes me like really inspired and it makes me just want to watch every single one.
Like all the teams are kind of improving. And I think it's just like really good to see that like the women's teams are coming too and they're like entertaining to watch.
Watching some of the best players in the world playing for our country on the biggest stage, it shows them that like they can do that too, that they can be next, and it gives them like a female role model, which is so important for them to look up to in the sport. So it's growing the sport, which is great, and bringing it to Canada, which is even better.
I think it's inspiring. I think it's gonna like help the game grow on the women's side.
Really good for people to watch and see how they play and how you could work on stuff differently.
I feel like it's going to be really inspiring for everyone who plays it, and I feel like a lot of people are going to be looking up to the great players like Sinclair or Fleming.
All of our youth players right now know all of the players' names on the national team, and that's just like something super exciting to see, and like where they're running around saying, I want to be Jessie Fleming and I want to be Christine Sinclair. Like they're really growing the game with the youth because then they're able to develop that all across the country and build the sport. I feel like the World Cup is that it's streamed and broadcasted is great because it's a great inspiration for all young athletes and young soccer players across Canada to see the level that they can achieve, because all Canada players were once us young girls playing here on Prince Edward Island.
We would like to say,
Go Canada, go!
Welcome back. The very first East by Northwest Summit kicks off this weekend in Vancouver. The conference is looking to connect storytellers, producers, actors, policymakers, and more, all with the goal of highlighting and empowering racialized voices across different mediums, from film to even gaming. And to tell us more about the work being done, Bing Chen joins me now live. He's the co-founder of Gold House, based in Los Angeles, California, a nonprofit dedicated to uplifting the voices of Asian Americans. So Bing, nice to have you with us, first of all.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be in Canada.
Yes, it's great to have you here. So Bing, you just wrapped up your keynote at East by Northwest minutes ago. What was the message that you shared with the audience?
Yes, ma'am. It was that, especially in challenging times when issues like diversity, equity, inclusion are being challenged, policies are being challenged, people are being challenged, that we have to build our own houses instead of just fixing existing systems. So we have to tell the stories we want to tell. We need to build our own studios, build our own companies, and that first starts by communities like the one that East by Northwest has created.
Oh, very interesting. So finding our own path. So your nonprofit Gold House has become very influential in Hollywood. You know, many studios are looking to partner with you when it comes to AAPI-led casts in terms of marketing and financing and even in consulting. What do you think has driven that interest?
I think it's several factors. One, the unpopular first opinion is commercial success. We now have the most viewed TV show or series in history in Squid Game. We have the most awarded film of all time that is also the most lucrative for A24 and Everything Everywhere All at Once. And money talks. Money, unfortunately or fortunately, is the only universal true language. And so I think we've demonstrated that our community shows up and is worth it. I think second is creative just inspiration. As I just alluded to, Everything Everywhere All at Once is not just a commercially viable film, it's actually the most awarded film of all time. K-pop as a musical genre has completely exploded the sensibility of import, of export, whether something is in an English language or not. And so I think being really creatively singular and aspirational is number two. And then third, I think something that's really important is showing that our diaspora, even though we may only be in the United States 7%, punch well above our weight. We're in the United States the fastest growing minority, and around the world, we're actually the majority at 5 of the 8 billion. And so I think we're teaching incumbents in sort of old systems that if you use new eyes and new lenses, there are actually incredible opportunities, whether commercially, critically, culturally, or creatively, everywhere.
And so what are some of the hurdles you still see as BIPOC creatives try to gain equal footing in spaces that have historically been less welcoming, like film or theater?
I think it's several, unfortunately. In many ways, the recent events that have happened across the industry are sending us all back. And so number one is it's now once again become hard to bet on new, unproven creators who have been systemically shut out of the system, which means the solution is we need to continue to invest in multicultural creators, first-time creators, and so forth, whether it's through non-profit platforms like Gold House, or through this incredible new organization, the Racial Screen Equity Office here in Vancouver. I think the second challenge is there's often a scarcity mindset of all minorities are fighting for the same piece of pie, when really it has always been us who actually bake new pies. I think back to my first job at YouTube and Google, where the global creator economy, many people don't know, was actually engineered by the Asian, the Black, and the LGBTQ communities because we were disenfranchised or not represented on TV. By the way, fast forward a decade, that creator economy is now worth over $100 billion because of sort of proliferation of platforms like Twitch, Pinterest, and others beyond YouTube. And so I think that lesson tells me that there's not just a cardinal imperative to invest in others, but there's actually a commercial imperative because when we have actually forced together, we have not only changed policy in the case of the Civil Rights Act, but actually engineered new industries in the case of the creator economy.
All right, Bing, very inspiring to speak with you. We're all going to try to work to build more new pies. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Bing Chen from Gold House.
Thanks for having me.
New figures show continued growth in the economy, but climate change is holding the country's GDP back. We'll find out how next.
Today, more than half the Canadian workforce is employed in an office of some sort. And with that in mind, telecommunications experts are trying to revolutionize the offices of the 1980s. And some Canadian manufacturers have emerged as world leaders in that area. More from Colin Hoth.
Office workers are the processors of information. The new office technology promises to do for them in the next 10 years what automation did for the workers on the factory floor 10 years ago.
For the economy to progress in the future, we have to get good at processing information, just as we're already good at making goods.
The word processor, already rapidly replacing the typewriter, is just the beginning. They'll soon be hooked into computer memory banks that do away with filing cabinets and reference libraries.
Good afternoon.
afternoon, Xerox service.
Computers that talk to each other are just around the corner, capable of handling money transfers and ordering of stock. Electronic mail is ready to edge out the traditional letter, and the electronic conference avoids at least some of those business trips. Some believe that our crowded city cores will soon take on a new look as companies recognize the potential for doing business from suburban centers or even from home. Canadian electronic manufacturers have quietly emerged as world leaders in providing the kind of sophisticated hardware that's needed for the office of the future. They're already selling to the Americans, and yes, even to the Germans and the Swiss.
I think potentially Canada could do very well indeed. The technology is there, the businesses are dynamic, the government is making an effort to support and encourage all these developments. But what I would say is it can't be taken for granted. It's a very competitive world.
The federal government estimates that by the mid-80s, the office revolution could be earning Canadian electronic manufacturers $3 billion a year. Colin Holt, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's economy continued to show resilience in May. Numbers out today indicate a fifth straight month of GDP growth. As Kyle Bax reports, growth occurred despite recent challenges in the oil and gas sector.
In spite of all the predictions of a possible recession or minimal growth this year, so far the country's economy is faring better than expected. The latest figures by Statistics Canada for May show growth of 0.3%. The number would have been even higher if not for wildfires in Western Canada hurting production in the oil patch. That sector had its worst month in 3 years. Oil patch companies are reporting their latest financial results this week, with several taking a profit and production hit because of the wildfires.
Almost everyone has commented that forest fires have impacted Q2 production. For the most part, though, a lot of it is just delays in terms of tying in new wells or precautionary measures that took some production offline. But for the most part, no major infrastructure was burnt down, and Q3, Q4 production looks like it's back and catching up here.
If you think back to the start of the year, most economists, myself included, we're calling for at least a shallow downturn this year, and we haven't really seen that yet. So I would say overall the economy has hung in there, and it's dealt with a lot in the last year. So the fact that it managed to grind out even modest growth, I think, is actually pretty encouraging.
Still, Statistics Canada says early data for June is pointing toward a slight drop in the economy. Several economists say at this time the Bank of Canada is unlikely to hike interest rates further. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Toronto.
The Royal Military College's cafeteria in Kingston is plagued by complaints of a rat infestation and moldy, undercooked food. Dan Takuma investigated after obtaining internal emails on the poor conditions of the dining hall.
Thank you. The Cadet Dining Hall serves up more than 3,000 meals to hungry students at the Royal Military College every day. But last summer, it was shut down for 6 weeks. The reason? Rats.
It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. We didn't enjoy that whatsoever.
This chef and union official says staff saw rodents running around in the middle of the day.
We were very disturbed by that. I think quite a few people couldn't fathom it.
CBC News obtained internal emails describing the infestation and how cleanup crews found a rat in its death throes, along with feces and urine throughout the kitchen. RMC says the rodent infestation is over, and a pest control company now makes weekly visits to ensure they don't return. But other problems persist. There have long been complaints about food quality.
A student says issues with the food continued this past year, describing what they saw at mealtimes and the way it impacts cadets. CBC has agreed not to identify the student who fears speaking out could affect their academic and military career.
I've seen mold on bread a lot. I've seen a lot of insects. We often just get food that is uncooked. I mean, it's gross.
RMC says it hears the complaints and takes action, like the time worms were found in the broccoli.
We are a kitchen and these sorts of things will happen. However, we have a very good quality control program. We're trying our very best to do better.
Students are hoping they do better. Current cadets pay around $600 a month for the meal plan and can't opt out. Dan Takama, CBC News, Kingston.
Human remains have been found close to Switzerland's famous Matterhorn. The body has been identified as a German climber missing since 1986. As Christine Birak reports, the rapid shrinking of alpine glaciers led to the discovery.
Right now, we are seeing the images of sweltering hot cities, blazing wildfires, and all the destruction they're leaving behind. But when you move into naturally colder environments, we're also seeing climate change at work, melting glaciers around the world and revealing long-lost stories from the past, including the body of a climber who disappeared decades ago. Swiss police say hikers in Switzerland trekking near the country's iconic Matterhorn mountain came across the remains of a mountain climber who'd gone missing while he too was hiking there nearly 40 years ago. Now, police did not reveal the man's identity or the circumstances surrounding his death. So did he get lost? Was he injured in some way? They wouldn't say. But in a statement, police did say the man was originally from Germany. He was 38 years old when he was reported missing after not returning back from a hike. Officers said the discovery was made earlier this month and that DNA analysis enabled the identification of the mountain climber. So after 37 years, his family was likely notified that he had been found. As you saw, police published pictures of a lone hiking boot with red laces sticking out of the snow. It's worth mentioning this isn't the first time shrinking glaciers due to climate change have led to the discovery of bodies and other personal belongings from the past, and it likely won't be the last. The UN's meteorological chief has said the world is losing glaciers to climate change. It seems faster than expected. Of course, with all that melting, sea levels are rising, highlighting how vast the effects of climate change are on our warming planet. Christine Birak, CBC News, London.
It's one of the province's rarest ecosystems, but many of the species who call it home are endangered. After the break, a look at those trying to protect it. Stay with us.
This is Kernza. Brittany Cole first became interested in the perennial wheat while working for the PEI Department of Agriculture on a climate adaptation project. Now she's doing a PhD project on it, based out of Dalhousie University. Cole says Kernza has lots of interesting characteristics.
It is a perennial, so it comes back every year, and it has a really deep rooting system. So that just makes it more resilient to climate changes and extreme weather. It also has the carbon storage potential for the deep rooting system, and the fact that it's in the ground for several years, you're storing carbon for that time.
Kernza was developed in the American Midwest by a nonprofit group called the Land Institute. They're promoting the environmental benefits of the perennial wheat. Because Kernza is a perennial, it can be harvested for 4 to 7 years from one planting, reducing the amount of plowing.
Every time we plow the soil, we break up the microbial community that's there. We open up the soil to erosion. There's carbon losses every time we plow the soil.
Brittany Cole's research is looking at how Kernza grows here in the Maritimes, as well as here on PEI. She also has test plots in Fredericton, Truro, and the Annapolis Valley. The seeds for the Kernza crop come from the University of Manitoba, so better suited for the Canadian climate. Another benefit of Kernza, it can be used as forage to feed animals, as well as producing a grain harvest.
If it does grow well here, then we have to look at what markets is it best suited for. The grain that you harvest from it is a little bit different than our traditional grain, so we would have to work on finding some unique markets for it.
In the United States, the Patagonia Clothing Company has created a line of products made with Kernza, including a beer and pasta. Brittany Cole will have her first harvest in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what the yield is like and crunch the numbers.
It's the first time it's ever been grown out in Atlantic Canada and the Maritimes, so it's a big deal, I guess, to try something new and see how it does.
Depending on how things go with Kernza, Cole also has her eye on some other potential perennial crops, possibly perennial barley, as her search continues for new crops to help combat the impacts of climate change. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Harrington.
A third victim who died in last weekend's floods in Nova Scotia has now been identified. CBC News has confirmed 6-year-old Colton Cisco was traveling with 6-year-old Natalie Harnish, who also died when the waters rose. 52-year-old local musician Nicholas Holland is among the dead, but was involved in a separate incident. One young person remains missing. And residents of a Montreal neighborhood woke up to major flooding this morning. This is in Saint Michel. Cars partially submerged and streets filled with rushing water. Some residents were asked to leave their homes while emergency workers closed off a large section of the area. The cause of the flooding is still unclear, but there are unconfirmed reports it could be due to a water main break. Certainly don't want to wake up to that. Hey, Darius?
Definitely not.
No. Okay. You're watching something else, though. Some more extreme weather over on the east there in Montreal, Ottawa area?
Yes, it looks like Montreal is being hit especially hard today because they've also had a severe thunderstorm warning in place for most of the day. Now, Ottawa and Montreal and the surrounding area have had these warnings sort of popping up and down throughout the day. Watches, warnings. We even had 2 tornado watches and warnings temporarily up, mostly around the Ottawa area. Now, it's not clear if a tornado actually touched down there or if the conditions were just ripe for it. It'll probably be a day or two before we know for sure whether a tornado actually touched down. But those weather watches and warnings, nothing like that here in BC. Fortunately, it looks like just an air quality statement in the northeast, nothing else to speak of, not even a heat warning in the south. Is that going to keep being the case? Well, if we look at our satellite analysis, that high pressure system, if it was going to stay in place for quite a while, we might expect that those air quality warnings would spread. Tomorrow might be the case that we see a few more pop up in the northeast, but it looks like that high pressure system is going to be moving out of the northeast into Alberta tomorrow. So we get to see those showers through part of the central interior, but by tomorrow evening, not too much to speak of. We did see some of that rain flash through the central interior during the day. Sunday, similar story, except now the rain comes up to the north because that high pressure system has moved out of the province. Potential for some thunder showers in the Kootenays as well as a result of the instability from that low sitting off the coast. But by Monday, it's mostly rain for the coast, the north, and the central parts of the province. The island should get a good blanket as well, but not for Victoria. It looks like they're staying as dry as Vancouver is. And if we look around the province, it seems to be a very similar story that we've seen recently, with some showers blanketing the coast. Sometimes we see the showers here in the northeast, but it doesn't look like it tomorrow. But central, interior, and coast getting plenty of rain, while up here and down here, we stay mostly dry, and that's true of Vancouver too. As we said, it looks like nothing but sun in the forecast ahead. Some clouds this weekend. On Saturday, they're clearing out pretty early. Sunday, they'll stick around a little bit longer, but the sun's still poking through, and no moisture to speak of, which I feel like I end off saying every single day.
Yes, it feels like it's been that way, but I am enjoying these low 20s in the temperature bracket.
Yes, that is very nice.
All right, thank you so much, Darius.
Have a good weekend.
You too. A group of Indigenous stewards are doing their best to protect one of the province's rarest ecosystems. The Garry Oak ecosystem, which sits on the southeast coast of Vancouver Island and the southern Gulf Islands, is home to hundreds of species, many of them endangered. Have a look.
Hello, I'm Connell.
And I'm Emily.
And we are standing in a really special ecosystem that is filled with plants that are at risk of going extinct.
Now, these plants only exist today because of the stewardship by Indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial, and they continue this stewardship today.
It's Glacial Hela, Papakia the Nisni, to listen at Tiatanu at Husinich, just Laasin at Huchatlip, Equisi Laa at Moachat. Good day, everybody. My name is Papakia. I come from this land here in Husinich, and I come from the village Huchatlip, and I also come from Moachat. I've been working at Pepeking Out for 7 years. Pepeking Out is a native plant nursery located at the Tsleil-Waututh Tribal School. That's home for where we keep all of our plants that we add back into Husinich territory. We take the youth out to do restoration, to remove invasive plants, but also throughout the school year, we've been teaching children how to propagate plants, native plants that are going to be reintroduced back into our Husinich territory. I come from a family of people who really enjoy plants, plant people on both sides of my family, so I came by it really naturally. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s when I joined the Sinchothanese program to learn Sinchothan through UVic that I started to learn more about the plants. And then it was my cohort and my uncles who actually decided to designate me as the plant person for our cohort. So being able to hone into a specialty was something that really helped me get into my love for native plants. These Glacial Unoaks, these camas meadows have always been stewarded by my ancestors. So when I come to these places here, I feel like I'm visiting family.
It's Glacial, schoolhouse with the net. She to say that you can actually class Scottish vocal milk, eating in Cowton, to eat in Samnat. Good day, my name is Tiffany Joseph. My Sinchothan name is Scholasowit. My involvement with stewardship of these lands started around 2014. I started learning about the Indigenous plants and how my ancestors would make medicines from them, and also learned the skills of how to propagate these plants so that we could increase the populations of the Indigenous plants. I work with HAT, Habitat Acquisition Trust, stewarding this park. Indigenous stewardship is being a good host and helping people have a good mindset and being welcoming, and also educating people about colonial history and the harms of these invasive species, but also the wealth of the Indigenous plants, of the Indigenous peoples, and how the way that we cared for the land and cared for the foods and served the foods and prepared medicines and harvested medicines allowed for us to be people who had safe societies. Our societies were rooted in kindness. When I think about what is the difference between how I promote stewardship as an Indigenous person to these lands, I incorporate teachings from my family and from my community and my ancestors. The teachings that my family have given me comes from time immemorial. My family was given responsibilities to care for this land. We were able to care for these lands in harmony and create abundance, create biodiversity. And so it's possible for everyone living here to be able to do the same thing.
So Tiffany, we're here in one of my favorite places. It's the Garry Oak Meadow. Can you tell me a little bit more about it though?
We would be more inclined to call it a Glacial Unuk. So Glacial Unuk is like a camas area. We would center the camas Glacial because the way we would steward these lands would be through controlled burns. And we did the controlled burns to help provide nutrients to the camas. Camas is a purple lily. There's some of these purple lilies here in this meadow right now. The Garry Oak tree, which we call Chung Eich, is a companion plant to the camas. So the leaves of the Chung Eich, they'll drop on the ground, and they're acidic. So what my ancestors did with their ingenuity is decide, we'll burn this to transform the acidity and alkalize it so that the leaf matter would become nutrients and help build up soil. The warmth of that fire, of course, would be impacting the camas bulbs as they're underneath the soil. It has resulted in the most biodiverse ecosystem that you can find in so-called BC, and there's still evidence of that today. That's why when you go to a Garry Oak meadow, you're not just going to find camas, you're going to find sea blush, a lot of sea blush. Right now we have larkspur in bloom. You'll also find chocolate lily. I don't know how many ecosystems have companion plants that are a mighty oak and a tiny little bulb that produces probably the most beautiful purple little lily that you'll ever see in the world. This flower grows from a bulb. The camas bulb was our food staple. So how today we might eat potatoes or rice, my people, my ancestors, the Saanich people, would eat camas bulbs.
Pakia, it is so amazing to be here in this beautiful meadow. Can you tell us about what stewardship activities are you doing at the moment?
We're in the Penafong moon, and that means that it's the camas harvest moon. So if you'd like to, we can actually go harvest some bulbs. I have a digging stick, and we can dig some up, and I'll show you what we do. This is a traditional camas digging stick. It's made out of ash or ironwood, and then it had been burnt to become harder, and then we have a cedar handle. And you'll find a lot of these materials in the Garry Oak ecosystem, so you find all the tools you need around what you're going to be harvesting. I see I loosened a small couple bulbs here. So just use your hands.
Just using your hands.
Yeah.
I see some here already.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, you found one of the bigger ones.
It's a bigger one?
Yeah, and here's one of the little ones.
Wow. That's much smaller than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it is. So this is one of the young camas bulbs here, and the best ones to eat are about the size of our fist. It's always been a process for us to be out here digging up the camas, separating the bulbs. The quislatls are really important food for the Saanich people. We've been stewarding the quislatl anok, or the camas meadows, since time memorial, since the beginning of time. And this is a really sacred job to Saanich women and folks to prepare our food. It's a natural process, so it was a gift that was given to us from Chaos, but it's also been stewarded by the Saanich people, specific women and families who would be designated stewards, who would monitor all the quislatl anok, and we would maintain them to have certain crops in certain areas. It's almost like a potato. It tastes almost like the same consistency as a sweet potato.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So we've obviously come into this park today, we've dug up some camas, harvested it, and you're going to take it back and cook it and eat it. Is this something that we can all be doing though?
Oh, that's a great question. I have treaty rights, Douglas Treaty Rights, which means I'm allowed to come harvest in my traditional territory. So not everybody's able to come and harvest camas. But that being said, you can grow your own camas too. If you have it growing in your garden, if you have it growing in pots as well, then I think it's fair for people to be able to harvest that.
We, the Saanich people and our neighbors, the Lekwungen people, we had an abundance of camas, an abundance of food. We didn't have to go hungry because of this food source, and neither did any of the species, the other species that live here and call these lands home. They were also able to eat camas, and we lived amongst one another in harmony. A lot of the work I've done over the years has been removing invasive plants like Scotch broom and English ivy and Himalayan blackberry. And of course, educating people about why we need to remove these invasive plants. So for example, Scotch broom changes the makeup of the soil so that only it lives. It's a very selfish plant, self-centered plant, wants itself to live and nothing else. And so that is not in harmony with the ecosystem. We can
have a positive impact, and these problems that seem insurmountable are actually achievable if we work together and if we have that good mindset. I feel like that cannot be understated, how the positive mindset when you're on the land can make a difference.
During this time of reconciliation is a really great opportunity to learn about the native ecosystems, to where you're living is really important, to learn what to look out for to help it thrive. There are all different types of things that we can all do individually. So if you know about the different types of invasive species in your region, you can just easily pull a couple of those out for a couple minutes, and that makes a huge difference.
Everyone who lives in the Garry Oak ecosystem, as well as the coastal Douglas fir biogeoclimatic zone, are responsible of ensuring that this rare ecosystem that you won't find anywhere else in the world is stewarded properly. If we took the time to be responsible for how we care for these lands, I can only imagine what ripple effect that might have.
Okay, so we've had the best time learning about these plants with you today here in this beautiful meadow. Thank you so much for having us.
The Glacial Anuk has been stewarded since time immemorial, so there's so much diversity here and so much for us to learn about here.
So is there anything that we can do to show our respect to the meadow?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I'll teach you how to say thank you to the camas. So we say Haishka Glacial.
Haishka Glacial.
Yeah, just like that. Wonderful.
When the BC Lions take on the Edmonton Elks tomorrow night, fans can tune into a historic broadcasting first. It's CFL in Punjabi. That's next.
This is 11-month-old Maxime Bajul Salas, and this is her surrogate mother. The pair haven't been together since Maxime was born. Maxime lives in France, her surrogate mother lives in Ontario. Now they're reunited on PEI.
It's amazing. It's a great moment, a very moving moment for us. It's the most beautiful baby you have ever seen in your life, isn't it?
I was very lucky to be able to carry 3 children for 2 separate families and kind of grew all of our families that way. Basically, it just means that I carry children for other families who are unable to have children of their own. My 2 youngest surrogate babies are 3, and the youngest will be 1 next month. So we haven't seen either of them since they were born. So it's kind of amazing to see how much they've grown from these squishy little newborns to toddlers and running around and interacting. It's amazing.
Maxime is Grady's 3rd surrogate. She had 2 others with a family from Sweden. Now 3 families from all over the world are celebrating their children together.
It's quite amazing. It's really nice to be back and see everyone. When we got started on all of this, it was important for both of us for the kids to have the opportunity later on when they grow up. Because, I mean, we want to have a relationship with Amanda, and that's our choice. But for us, it was important for the kids also to have their choice, meaning that we want to stay in contact. When they grow up, if they want to go to Canada and see Amanda, that's an option. They can do that.
The idea that we're doing this together, and it's just even more love and more, it's a strength for the child as well, right? I think curiosity is one of the biggest things, and to know who your surrogate is and that the extended family, that it's not even a surrogate anymore, it's Amanda. It's a part of you and your onward journey. I think it's just beautiful and just the way it should be.
Grady works with an agency matching surrogates to parents. In this case, the parents introduced their DNA, found a donor, and Grady got pregnant through in vitro fertilization and carried the babies to term.
Everyone will have a different reason, but for me, I mean, I really enjoy being pregnant for the most part. It's an easy thing for me. Birth is not a walk in the park, but that moment of birthing that baby and being able to watch people who is not your partner become parents is the most life-changing thing.
The group is cherishing their last few days together, cooking, playing, and laughing because they don't know when they will see each other again. Grady wishes they all had more time together and is hoping she doesn't have to wait another 3 years to see the children she birthed and their happy families. Tony Davis, CBC News, Summerside.
A big play for the CFL. Tomorrow's game between the BC Lions and Edmonton Elks will be the first ever pro football game broadcast in Punjabi. The broadcast was first announced by the Elks on Tuesday, featuring the well-known Hockey Night in Canada Punjabi duo Harpreet Pander and Takdeek Dindal. With BC's large Punjabi population, the Lions say this broadcast will expose the game to a new group of fans.
What I really hope is somebody who's never been to a football game gets excited hearing our broadcast and, they call their friends and family and say, hey, you know what? I want to go to Commonwealth Stadium next week and watch a game, or I want to go to BC Place Stadium next week to watch a Lions game. That would be really cool to just spark a little bit of interest.
The historic broadcast will be carried on AM 600 at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Always great to see the diversification of sport, of art, of all those things. All right, that's it for us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on CBC News at 6. A reminder to download CBC Gem and watch us there. That's our free app. And Benit Breach will be in at 11 p.m. tonight. Have a great weekend.